Today I'm playing with homemade texture plates on the gel plate. Hi, I'm Elizabeth St. Hilaire and welcome to my channel. This week I am playing with some texture plates that I created by spreading molding paste through a stencil on a 9x12 sheet of cardstock. I'm going to show you how to layer it with translucent colors on the gel plate to create some amazingly interesting combinations. I thought it would be fun to revisit creating your own texture plates with molding paste and a stencil onto cardstock. So I have done this before and used them for crayon rubbings, but I want to show you how you can use them for gel printing. So I have a 9x12 gel plate. So I'm using a 9x12 piece of cardstock and a 9x12 stencil so I can use this completely full coverage on the gel plate. So what I'm going to do is take the cardstock, put the stencil on top of it, and spread molding paste through the stencil with my silicone shaper. So you're just going to spread the molding paste through so that you get a good relief texture. And you want to just scrape it through enough so that you can sort of see the stencil pattern through the top, but you have a good texture coverage. I'm doing this on my non-stick craft mat desktop, so I am okay if I go over the edges because it's an easy cleanup to wipe that molding paste right off the surface of my desk. You may want to do it on a sheet of palette paper if you don't have this desktop surface, or maybe a sheet of freezer paper so that you can get right to the edges without worrying about messing up your work surface. So we're just going to spread this through. And then I'm going to try to smooth it out with the silicone shaper. You could also use a credit card or a palette knife or a catalyst wedge, whatever you have in your stash or whatever you prefer to use. I kind of like this because it's like a paintbrush shape and it's kind of ergonomic in your hand. And it allows you to sort of spread this in a nice, straight, smooth fashion. So what I try to do is get it all spread out and then I go over it to smooth it. So I'm going to make sure I don't have any. I like using the black cardstock too because the molding paste is white. So if I miss a spot, I can see the dark color showing through as opposed to using a white cardstock. So I can see if I've missed any places because of the contrast in color. So now I'm just smoothing it out once I've got it spread, making sure I don't have any dark areas. And then I'm going to lift it up. And I don't think you need to be super precise with this. Then I'm going to lift up the stencil and make sure I take it right to the sink to clean it. But here you'll see we've got this beautiful texture pattern. And I'm going to clean the stencil and I'll be right back. So you definitely want to clean the stencil right away before the molding paste dries on it. And you can see the raised texture of this molding paste that's going to dry on the cardstock and create a texture rubbing plate. So I'm just going to take a wet towel and clean up the molding paste. And the beauty of the silicone scraper brush is that if I don't get to it right away, the molding paste will peel right off of the silicone surface because the medium doesn't stick to the silicone. So it's easy cleanup even if you let stuff dry in it. So I'm setting this off to the side to dry, and in the meantime, I'll bring in 2 texture plates that are done, complete and dry. So the molding paste that I used is regular molding paste. You could use light molding paste, coarse molding paste, whatever you have on hand. All we're trying to do is create the texture, the raised pattern onto the 9x12 cardstock sheets. Now, I really like these cardstock sheets because they're flexible. Sometimes people get texture rubbing plates or they make texture rubbing plates on canvas panel and it's more rigid. So this being flexible allows us to push it really nicely into the flexible surface of the gel plate. So we get a really good contact and we don't get any missed spots in the middle where a canvas, board, or a rigid surface might warp. So these are great because they're flexible and they're really going to make great contact with my 9x12 gel plate. So I'm going to use them to press and remove paint, and that's going to be a whole different effect than using the stencil, which completely blocks the paint. So a stencil or a mask completely blocks the paint. So say you put this onto the plate, this is totally blocking the paint from coming to the paper. Whereas when we use a texture plate, we're going to press and remove some of the paint, but not all of it. So we're going to get a more subtle pattern when we do a texture plate than we do with a stencil. So this is a unique way to get a different result from your same stencil. So I'm going to be using the Yasutomo Sketch Rice Paper Pad. This is my 9x12 favorite pad for gel printing because I love the way that it has a nice smooth surface that creates a crisp, really good detailed print. In addition to that, I use all my papers that I create for collage. So this paper is highly absorbent. It absorbs the glue and it presses and adheres down perfectly flat because of that. So it's a double bonus, this paper. Also, it's the perfect size. So the first thing I'm going to do is to create a light colored solid sheet with some manganese blue fluid acrylic, and I'm going to roll that out with my 6-inch Speedball Deluxe sprayer. I like the 6-inch sprayer because it covers the 9x12 plate pretty quickly. They do make other size sprayers, and you may have one in your stash that works, but I certainly wouldn't want to do this job with a 2-inch or a 1.5-inch sprayer. So I've got some dents in my gel plate. I probably should have used the other side, but let's see what kind of a print we get here. So I'm going to put the paper into the paint. I'm going to use my Speedball Red Baron to press. And I like this tool because I can go out to the corners and off the edges. When we rub with our hands, we kind of tend to stay in the middle. And I like this tool because I can get all the way off the edges and in the middle for a good impression. So now I've got a solid sheet of manganese blue. And the next thing I'm going to do is go with a contrasting darker color. So this is Payne's Gray. It's a lot darker, and that's what you want. You want a lot darker contrasting color. We're going to roll that out, and we're going to press the texture plate into it. I need a little bit more paint here. I recently conditioned the surface of this plate with baby oil, so for a little while, the paint is going to bead up a bit like it did when the plate was new because of that. So it's beading up a bit, but I'm going to work quickly. I'm going to press the texture into the paint, and I'm going to use the Baron for that as well, so I can get right out to the edges and the corners. And what's going to happen with this texture plate is it's going to remove some of the paint, but not all, in the polka dot pattern. So we're going to lift that up, and we're going to have the polka dot pattern, and then we're going to take the prepared blue sheet and print. So we're going to get a subtle version of the polka dot stencil that I used to create that texture plate. So here we have a beautiful subtle dot pattern on the blue, and if I had another prepared sheet, I can get a second print, but I didn't make a second manganese blue sheet, but I'm going to pull this anyway. And you see I get the ghost print, but I really like the first pattern with the subtle dark blue on the light blue for a totally different effect than you would get with the same stencil. I'm going to put nickel azo gold over the blue. Now this is going to make it green. I'm going to clean my brayer here. It's going to make it green because this azo gold is basically a very yellow brown. So it could be interesting. We'll use this to pull up that ghost print, and we'll do it on this sheet. So we'll get a whole second version of the circular texture plate just by messing around with the ghost print and a translucent color that's going to visually blend with the dark blue. So we should get a greenish color. This is going to be totally different, yes, than the previous print. Wow, look at that. So that's really yummy and very earth tone. And that's the ghost print secondary pickup to the first beautiful blue print. Now I want to show you this technique a second time with my peacock stencil texture plate. So let's do a totally different color combo this time. Let's use fluorescent pink for the base sheet, fluorescent magenta. For this, I really want to make sure I don't have any residual yellow gold in my brayer. I have a little, so it's going to change the color of this just slightly. Typically, I use 2 brayers. That way I don't have to worry about cleaning out one brayer completely by rolling it off, because rolling it off really never cleans it completely. So I use 2 brayers, but I'm in the garage studio today, and the second brayer is in the inside studio. But the reason I use the 2 is I use one for warm colors and one for cool colors. So I would set this aside and get a new brayer. And then by the time I go back to the first one, the paint is dry. Okay, so this will be a pinkish color. And it's gonna also have picked up some of the bits of leftover on the lower layer. So it's a bit of a grungy pink color. So then we have to decide what would be a nice darker contrasting color to use with this. We could probably go with the manganese blue, although it's very translucent, so it's going to let the pink show through it, and it'll probably blend to be a purple, which could be pretty cool. So I'm going to take out one more piece of the rice paper so we can mess around with the ghost print from the second one as well. Also, I have a roll-off cleanup sheet here. We could actually mess with that with the ghost print of the second one. So let's try the manganese blue. We're going to roll that out on the gel plate. It's got a little bit of pink in the brayer, so it's already making it a little bit purple. And manganese blue is one of those colors that really reacts to any oil on the surface of the plate. When you get a new plate, this is one of the colors that beads up the most. So I'm going to work quickly to press the peacock texture plate into the manganese blue before it reacts to the oil, before it can have a chance to bead up. Okay, so we're gonna get a good print into, and I think I picked up a lot of that color because it's so thin. So let's see, we'll see what we got here. It doesn't look like there's a lot of color left on the plate. A certain amount of your color is going to be picked up by your texture plate, and a thinner, more translucent color is probably going to be way more subtle than that Payne's gray that we did the first time. But here we go. But we don't have the ghost print left over because we had less paint. So we get the purple as I expected, and the nice, soft, subtle variation of the peacock texture plate. So I would like to try the bubble, the dots, the Dorothy dots over this one. So I'm going to use that translucent manganese blue, and I'm going to add a little bit of the Payne's gray to it, and we're going to create kind of a middle value blue. And we're going to go back to the Dorothy dots stencil. And I'm going to add a little bit more Payne's gray because I can see that manganese blue is beading up under there. It's just really sensitive to the oil. Another color that's very sensitive to a brand new plate or the conditioning oil is green gold. Okay, so we're going to press this to remove the dot pattern. And I'm going to print it, instead of over a solid, like a roll-off sheet or a cleanup sheet or something you used, just randomly to roll your brayer off on, or maybe to clean your plate. So that's a great textured base for one of these texture plate impressions. So here we go. We're going to lift that up on here. And look at that. We've got the variations of color underneath. So instead of the solid, like we did the first time, we've got the beautiful variations. And it took the Payne's gray, the thicker paint, to make this work a little better. So now I've still got some of those polka dots, and why not transfer them to this in the interest of not wasting any paint. We can add the dots to this print. And since we have the peacock color there, let's see what happens. Why not? Let's put an opaque color on top. I've got a little bit of dark in my brayer. the Payne's Gray, so that's going to make it a little bit darker. Let's press the peacock pattern into the peacock color. Now this is an opaque color. It's not going to let what's underneath it show through. Whoops, I just shifted it. So I get a little bit of a messy pattern because I shifted it. So let's do that again. I think if you put out too much paint, you're going to have a little slipping and sliding with these. So you have to be mindful not to put out too much paint and to be careful when you're adding your pressure so that it doesn't slide. Okay. Okay. That's better. So we're going to put that over this one, and you're going to see what happens when you use an opaque color. The first time I used manganese blue, which is transparent, translucent, so you could see the pink through it, and it made purple. This time I'm using a color that you cannot see the tick marks through. You can most definitely see right through the manganese blue, but you cannot see through the teal. So what happens when I put an opaque texture plate color on top? Well, you're barely going to see what's underneath it. So this is a prime example why you want to use a translucent color on top so you can see through it. So you can get visual blending, so you can see through the layers. So when you're layering, you want to use translucent colors and not opaque colors unless you're going for this super subtle look. And you might think, well, what is she going to do with that? It's not as good as the others. Well, let's clean off the brayer and do the dark Payne's Gray on top. Now I've got a little bit of teal in my brayer, but let's see if we can get this peacock pattern to go on top. So we will lose the pink and purple that's underneath, but we can create a whole different effect. So again, the peacock stencil, because it's a more dense pattern, it's picking up more paint. So it gives us a bit less of a bold impression. So you may want to consider that when you're creating your own texture plates. The amount of space and openings and coverage of the molding paste makes a difference. So the dotted one has more space in between it, and the peacock one is more densely patterned. And the spiral one has a bit more of a dense pattern. So you're going to get different effects depending on the stencils that you use. But it's certainly fun to make several of the texture plates and just play with them and see what happens. So here I have the peacock pattern subtly on the opaque teal blue. So I hope you found this inspiring, and you never know what you're going to get until you play and experiment with the gel plate. That's why they call it a monoprint, because there's only ever going to be one that's just like it. Well, that's it. Thanks for being here this week. I hope you're inspired and you'll try creating your own texture plates with some of your stencils. Lord knows we all have tons of stencils, and this is just a different way to use them. I hope you have some fabulous results, and remember to use translucent colors if you want the layers to show through each other. I'll see you right back here next week.